Jim Morrison arrived at Orly Airport in Paris on the morning of March 12, 1971, and took a taxi to Hotel Georges V. This is where Jim and his girlfriend Pamela Courson stayed while searching for an apartment. Here is where Pam met the Comte Jean de Breteuil, whom she quickly had an affair with. In addition, he was her heroin supplier and possibly the man responsible for supplying Jim the fatal dose of heroin he snorted the night before he died, depending on which theory surrounding his death you believe. From here, they moved into an apartment in the 19th century Beaux-Arts building at 17 Rue Beautreillis, home of the French model Elisabeth Larivère, also known as Zozo, whom Pam met through Jean and became close friends. Zozo had to leave town on business for a few months, so she offered them her place. They lived on the 3rd floor. On the left, there had previously been a restaurant called Le Beautreillis. Whenever Jim was too tired to venture far, he and Pam would dine here. They were last seen here on the night of July 1st, 1971, where 2 German students witnessed a fight between them. An angry Jim crossed this street to head back to their apartment, with a screaming Pam chasing it. A couple of blocks north of here is Place des Vosges. This 17th century square is the site of medieval justs, royal palaces, and Renaissance military parades. Jim loved to sit on these benches and watch the children play, as well as write poetry on these benches under the trees. Some of his poems, from Wilderness and The American Night, were written here. He told many people that this was his favorite place in Paris. Across the street, on the northwest corner of the park, is the Alsatian restaurant, Ma Bourgogne. Jim was seen here often having coffee and croissant while reading the daily newspapers. After several hours of riding in the park, Jim would wander the streets. He would head back down Rue Beautreillis to Rue des Loins. He would walk down this street and listen to the children playing in the courtyard behind the wall on the right of the school L'École Massillon. The children's laughter echoed loudly of the surrounding buildings. Then, he would turn right on Henri IV with the school still on his right and head down to the river Seine and cross this bridge called Pont Sully to Ile Saint-Louis. He loved to hang out there and watch the boats pass by. Then, he would head back up the steps and walk west along the river till he reached the tip of the island and visit this bistro to have a few beers, usually Stella Artois or Cronenbourg. Then, he would cross the Pont Saint-Louis to the Ile de la Cité, where he would explore the Cathédrale Notre-Dame. He would eventually end up inside and lit a candle in one of the quiet chapels. Jim then crossed the river here at Pont Saint-Michel to the left back and walk along the river. He loved to stop and browse through the many bookstalls that lined the street. Then he would wander down Saint-André-des-Arts and visit the many bars along the way. He would walk throughout the side streets and along the open-air market along Rue de Seine. Jim was very attentive to the many street musicians entertaining in the streets. He would listen long and tip big. This young man was from Argentina, strumming his guitar for some euro. Walking up Rue de Seine, Jim found his way to La Palette, another water spot where he was often seen. Up the street and a few blocks away is the Hôtel Beaux-Arts. In May of 1971, Zozo and some friends needed to take up temporary residence back at 17 Rue de Beautreillis. So Pam and Jim stayed here on the 2nd floor in the same room where Oscar Wilde died. It was here, on the evening of May 7, 1971, when Jim fell out of the window and onto a parked car below. Here is the lobby and bar where Jim would visit. and the staircase leading up to his room. From here, he was within walking distance from the 6th arrondissement, well known for its nightlife and expensive cafes. Here is the famous Les Deux Magots, where Jim would drink often. Across the street is Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the oldest church in Paris. Around the block is the upscale restaurant Café de Flore, Pamela's favorite hangout, where Jim would visit often, as well as the Brasserie Lippe. Jim and Pam visited this corner often. Here is the bridge, Pont de la Concorde. This is where Jim hopped out of a car in a drunken haze and jumped on top of the rail. Luckily for him, Gilles Yeperman held another cab and brought him here to the apartment of Hervé Muller, a Parisian rock critic and friend of Gilles. Here's the famous door outside of Hervé's place where Jim, Pam, and Hervé's were photographed. Here is a view through the iron door, and a view from the door looking out. One evening in early June, Jim and Alain Ronet went to Sacré-Cœur, the Sacred Heart, the great white church at the summit of Montmartre in northern Paris. Here is a view from the Eiffel Tower. The Roman Basilica was resurrected in 1873 and dedicated to the 58,000 lives lost to the Franco-Prussian War. Next to the church is the town of Montmartre, a beautiful town filled with artists. I can't say for sure that Jim walked these streets, but I'm guessing he did. I'm sure he was drawn by the artists and beauty of this place. While Jim and Alain relaxed on these steps and looked out upon the Paris landscape, Jim noticed a green hill in the distance and asked Alain if he knew what it was. Alain explained that it was Père Lachaise, Paris' great cemetery, which dated back to Napoleon's time. Buried here are famous writers, poets, and philosophers. Jim wanted to visit it immediately, but by the time they arrived at this entrance, the gates were closed. Jim and Alain returned a couple days later and walked throughout the grounds. Jim said he liked the cemetery's spooky tranquility and that he definitely wanted to be buried there. Two days later, Jim was dead. Heart failure, drug overdose, government conspiracy, whatever. Jim now lies in the 6th Division, 2nd line, at grave number 5, thanks to Alain Ronet, who made all the arrangements. On July 7, 1971, Jim was laid to rest here near the memorial to the victims of the Nazi oppression in Paris in a cheap, undersized coffin. There was no priest, no religious observance, only Alain Ronet, Agnès Varda, Robin Wertel, Bill Sidon, and Pamela, who whispered the last line of Celebration of the Lizard.
Now night arrives with her purple legion. Retire now to your tents and to your dreams. Tomorrow we enter the town of my birth. I want to be ready.